Treasurer Josh Frydenberg met with dozens of business executives in Canberra today to wargame how they can be useful in the vaccine rollout. Follows offers from Woolies and Wesfarmers to use shopping centres and warehouses as vaccination hubs. Let's discuss this now with my economics panel from Melbourne, business commentator Terry McCrann, and also here in Melbourne, founder of Switzer.com.au, Peter Switzer. Terry, Josh Frydenberg bringing in big business to help. Can they help, and should we have done it earlier?
Well, Peter, to be frank, I saw it mostly as showboating, appearing to do something. Now, I can fully sympathise and understand why big business wanted to do it, because if the alternative is more lockdowns like we're seeing in New South Wales now, so destructive, so damaging not only to businesses themselves directly, but obviously their employees and indeed people more broadly, yes, let's try and do our bit to get more jabs into people's arms. But the bottom line on the reality of the vaccine issue is availability. And obviously, clearly, the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine are not going to be around in any significant numbers until October. And the vaccine hesitancy over AstraZeneca, which has been helped by none other than politicians, Prime Minister Scott Morrison, and most notably the Queensland Health Officer. So I don't think at the end of the day, having Bunnings offering a snag or Qantas offering frequent flyer points is really going to make a major difference. It's about getting the vaccine delivery right.
Peter, what did you make of the announcement to extend the Sydney lockdown another week?
Well, you know, the first 2 weeks, according to Shane Oliver from AMP Capital, cost the economy, the national economy, $2 billion. So at another week, there's another $1 billion. And look, the bottom line is, and Terry's right, this is kind of show pony type activities. And the one thing I will say I'm really happy about, Peter, is that Josh Frydenberg is getting involved. You know, the great success story out of the coronavirus has been, you know, the success of Josh as a treasurer. I think the actual handling of the vaccinations have been absolutely pathetic. I interviewed Dr. Theo Aroni in Bondi Junction in Sydney. He has 3,000 patients a week. He has 26 doctors. You know how many doses of AstraZeneca he got from the outset? 50 a week. Now, that just shows to me that the people who've been organising the vaccination program are off the pixies, and partly explains why the whole program is not really working well.
Yeah, I'll just make the point the states have got in the way here too with the vaccination hubs and all the politicking, because we do 10 to 12 million flu jabs every single year via GPs and pharmacies. Yeah. They would even use GPs until recently, pharmacies not until the end of the year. That's wrong. They should have been the front line from the get-go. I want to go to this term ESG. We hear it all the time: environmental, social and governance. And it's sort of a catch cry, Terry, for wealthy investors and super funds to basically affect environmental policy, a whole lot of other things via big companies, putting pressure in this case particularly on emissions commitments, net zero by 2030. The Australian's business editor, Tiki Fulton, calls it a tsunami of pressure on companies, activist shareholders. It's a big problem, Terry.
Well, it's a huge problem, excuse me, Peter, and one that we should not be facing. I mean, the corporate world should be about running their businesses efficiently, honestly and ethically, not about meeting vague, woke targets on any subject. I mean, there is no boundary to any of this. Ultimately, it's not just about sustainability, it's the entirety of the woke agenda. So it's something that corporations, something that business leadership, something that business organisations should be resisting very strongly. And indeed, it's what people managing super funds should also be resisting strongly, rather than being at the forefront of trying to force this down companies' throats. It's a very dangerous trend, it's a very negative trend, and it's something that spells significant cost and loss to Australia.
Yeah, and just quickly, Terry, I want to get to Peter onto something else, but of course you got all these super funds putting in a bid for Sydney Airport. One of the big issues that we haven't fought yet, but we will on emissions reduction, is transport. Now, if the industry funds are all want net zero by 2050, own Sydney Airport, are they going to put pressure on how many planes fly in and out of Sydney and put pressure on the government? I mean, seriously, this is the sort of stuff
Well,
This
obviously
is the
not.
sort of stuff that'll happen.
Well, those super funds won't be doing it, but clearly that sort of pressure will build. Yes, you're right, Peter.
No, all right. Home loans. I want to bring you here, Peter. Home loans. According to the ABS, some $32 billion worth of new mortgages were written last month. Last month, that's a record. Experts say, though, the ultra cheap home loans from the big banks are a thing of the past, are on the way out. What do you think, Peter?
Well, I think the fixed rate home loans, some were under 2% for 4 years. That was just extraordinary. They're gone. Fixed rate loans are on the way up. The variable rates are going to be interesting, Peter. They effectively are controlled by the cash rate. Though the banks can depart from that relationship between the cash rate and the variable rate. And we saw yesterday the Reserve Bank governors kind of backing away or slightly from his 2024 cash rates won't move until then promise. But I just think that we're still going to have a year or two of pretty good rates. But I think when we get to the end of 22, 23, then we'll start to see some real rises in interest rates because the economy is doing so well.
Another thing, although not everywhere, because another thing I picked up today, at least 93 Victorian businesses went broke over the last month on the back of the fourth lockdown here in Victoria, Terry. ASIC data says it's construction and retail. They're the ones that are entering insolvency and administration. Won't be the last, will they?
Well, no, that number clearly way understates the damage that was done by the lockdown, which is still continuing at some level. It's not a lockdown now, but the restrictions are still hurting businesses. And clearly, we now have to wait and see just exactly what the damage will be done in New South Wales. I mean, and you put these two states together, they are 60% of the national economy. So that 3 to 4 weeks in Victoria, 3 weeks, we hope only 3 weeks in New South Wales. And this is a big cost to the Australian economy.
It's huge. This is where lockdowns must end. Terry McCrann, Peter Switzer, thank you both for your time.
Cheers.
Peter.